Today, I want to talk about power and the responsibility that we as humans, as creators, have with that power. Because the same spark that can light the whole world can also be the same spark that annihilates it. The same fire that turns ordinary clay into beautiful pottery is the same tool that can turn cities into dust. We started this channel by talking about the myth of Prometheus, the time when humans got godlike powers. For all intents and purposes, we are now the gods in our universe. We have become creators, and thus the potential to be destroyers, even of ourselves. That changes the question. It should have never been, what can we do with fire? It should have always been, what should we do with fire? So we're going to look at that today, and through three different lenses, through myth and religion and philosophy, three that are trying to pull back from the ledge before it's too late and get us to consider what our role and responsibility is. This is the story of how power outpaced wisdom. And because of that, technology is not just neutral, it's a moral issue. The story of humanity thus far has been slowly outcreating nature. And with every new mastery over nature, the same questions get raised. Who controls it? Who benefits from this? Who suffers from this? What degree of suffering are we okay with? So fire is more than metaphor now. It's literal energy, destruction, creation, risk. And so the moral framing to consider for this entire episode is quite clear, I think. When humans decide to play as gods, how do we guard wisdom? How do we ensure humility and restraint? And can we learn from our short history thus far? Let's talk about a few different stages of this rise in godlike power. And man, each one of these stages could be its own episode, but this first stage will say from fire to electricity, the first real harnessing of nature. Fire here made us unique among all other animals. That's why we have myths to explain that, like Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus making the animals and then making us. We were set apart, we were different. And this is true in most creation myths. It gave us warmth and tools and comfort and freedom, cooking, transformation, bigger brains, so many wonderful things happened. Dang it, I grabbed a ton of books and now I'm thinking of one off the top of my head. It's called Transcendence by Gaia Vince. And it looks at evolution through four things, one of them being fire. I think the other is beauty, time, I'm forgetting, but fire I know is for sure one, and it plays such an important part in our evolution. It's fascinating. All books are not only listed in the description with a link for you to get, but I also have a shareable spreadsheet where each episode covers all the art or books or studies or movies, anything that is listed in an episode. You can go to that resource and just have it right there. And then electricity, as if anything could be bigger than fire, turned literal, invisible forces into power, pure power, and also communication at a huge level, never seen before. The telegraph, the radio, light. We recreated the sun, but already with even just this first stage of invention, we saw the warnings come, not just in myth, but in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which I know we covered a little bit in episode 1 because it's called The Modern Prometheus, because it's the warning about this harnessing of fire, what creativity and technology can do when wisdom can't keep up. Victor Frankenstein is not evil. He's simply curious without wisdom, without knowledge. What's the great quote from Frankenstein? Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example. How dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge. And even though Frankenstein definitely well anticipates every moral debate since, this creation without compassion idea, it didn't warn sternly enough. We did not learn our lesson. We're going to get into that in just a second, but it's such a strange tension, one that I'd like to explore for a second here. On one hand, we have this desire, this drive to understand the world. What is going on around us? How does it work? Why does it work? And because of that drive, because of that curiosity, man, the discoveries that we have made, the help that we have brought, the suffering that we have eliminated. So there's good there, no doubt about it. But how should our drive to understand be separated from our urge to control? Curiosity versus control. Can they even be separated? Will the one who builds always be the one who destroys? Will the one who creates always be the one who causes division? Is there a healthy way to advance technologically without hurting ourselves or others for the sake of innovation, for the sake of progress? It's a wonderfully complex moral issue, and one that I think most people know about or intuit deep down, and yet we can just never stop ourselves, can we? In Wednesday's episode, when we're looking at a philosopher who thinks so differently, who doesn't measure success based off productivity, but off of being true to yourself, living naturally, it can make you wonder, are the tribes that we consider to be way behind, non-civilized, are they not the ones living well? Are they not the ones that still understand the importance of family and relying on one another? Do they not have the basic survival skills down? That, by the way, for all our innovation, most of us have lost? Who will still be here if the world takes a technological turn for the worse? Who's not on screens 10 hours a day? I mean, we can make a lot of different comparisons here, but I think there's something to be said, something to be thought about for rearranging what has been so built into us that it's always up and to the right. That if you're not growing, you're dying. That stagnation is something to be hated. How much more should we have listened? How much more should we have slowed down? We're going to jump pretty far forward here for our second stage, the splitting of the atom, which, by the way, one book I wanted to recommend, The Making of the Atomic Bomb. It's one of the biggest and in some cases slowest books I have read, but in other parts you can't put it down. Our history with this technology is insane, and understanding all the little details, what was going on in the war, so the history part of it, what was happening in science for the first time, but also what was happening with man. That's why Oppenheimer is such a wonderful case study. What does one do when properly, thoroughly warned about the Frankenstein aspect of technology, but also the promises for peace? But before we get to Oppenheimer, we can start with Marie Curie, who isolated radium in 1898, literal power glowing in their hands. In 1938, Hahn and Meitner split uranium, discovering fission. In 1945, we have Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We can argue about the ethics of it all day, and it's an interesting discussion, but it's not at all what the focus of today is. The point is, how did we even get to a point where we had to conquer other insane power with an even more insane power, where that contemplation is even on the table in the first place? Was that not us opening up Pandora's jar to a whole new series of evils and potential harm and world enders? Did we really consider what we were doing? Or because of how humans are with each other, did we just race to the bottom while calling it racing to the top? Oppenheimer even quotes famously the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." They knew what this energy was. They knew the monster they had made. He also later said, physicists have now known sin. So it's how we opened. Again, the same technology that can light a city can destroy one. What an insane dichotomy humans have invented for themselves. Just forget justifications for a second. Humanity takes its greatest minds, its actual geniuses, and together in a small room, a group of geniuses is able to do what no collection of warlords could ever have dreamt about doing: the instant erasing of millions of people. Einstein lamented it well. Check out Ideas and Opinions if you've never read this. I think a lot of people think Einstein is so inaccessible, but it's not like you're just going to be reading through his proofs and theorems. So check this out. But he has a wonderful quote here that the release of atomic power has changed everything except our way of thinking. And man, isn't that the truth? If we were really ready to be able to do what that power can do, we should have been more evolved in our thinking to know never to create it in the first place, and to have stopped well before it's needed. Hannah Arendt, dang it, another book that I left upstairs. I've got too many books down here in the studio and then up in the office where you guys have seen my library. And I grab the ones I think I'm going to be covering, and then other things come to mind. But she called this the banality of power. Ordinary people enabling extraordinary destruction without reflection. And now we can move on to our third stage. And again, it was really clunky to just call these 3 stages as if there wasn't so many other evolutions and iterations. But this third one is now the age of the genome, or the algorithm. So 1953, Watson and Crick modeled DNA. In 2003, the entire human genome has been mapped. We can now read the code of life. That's crazy. In 2012, CRISPR happens. Now we can edit that code. Jump all the way up to just a couple years ago, what we are most recently in, AI. It crossed a threshold right in front of us in 2023 that would have been science fiction to anyone ever in the rest of history. For those that still consider ourselves to be invented creations, no matter where you believe that we came from, or if there was a God that created us, and if so, which God, there's still a fact in front of us. We are the gods now. Both for human life and artificial life, we create, we edit, we change. That's why it's so funny when so many of our myths are about all-powerful, all-wise, all-just gods, as if that's somehow a prerequisite before one creates life. If there are gods, it seems much more realistic that they would be like us, playing with the power they just got before they're ready for it. And so the line between invention and creation blurs, and in come all the ethical implications. I mean, there's so many, even for fire, even for electricity, even for the atomic age that we didn't cover. But now we're talking about genetic perfection and the eugenics nightmare that can become. Now we're talking about AI autonomy versus the loss of human agency. Now we have to contend with surveillance on a godlike level, an omnipresence and an omniscience that can be had by governments or even individuals. Nietzsche warned that he who fights with monsters should see to it that he himself does not become a monster, which is always the justification. Well, we had to, because of some other competition or some other problem, barely staying ahead through innovation, again, instead of through wisdom, through figuring out why we ever got here in the first place. There's a reckoning with all of this, and I want to kind of move into how we think about it, again, either via myth or religion or philosophy. First, we can look at the Mythic Mirror here. Ancient stories that tried to warn us, not necessarily against technology, but against arrogance. Technology would have been fine if, again, our wisdom had caught up as well. We can see this even in Genesis, the Tower of Babel, which has a lot of its own issues, but in terms of a myth that is acting as a way to A, explain where language comes from, but B, warn about advancement before we're ready. Humans build upward to reach heaven, but God scatters them. Some say out of jealousy, some say out of mercy, and I think that which one you see there has a lot to do with where you as a society at the time are. Icarus, who creates, but with too much pride and not enough forethought, and thus the wings are made of wax and melt at the heat of the sun. He wasn't ready. Phaethon steals the sun chariot, but burns the earth. That might be the most accurate comparison here. What's the common thread? Hubris, greed, the belief that we can handle what we used to call divine tools, but lacking divine wisdom. We have modern myths that echo it. You can just go read Jurassic Park. It's the exact same thing, except playing with a newer invention. Again, the genome, DNA. It's a warning on an absolutely huge level. You could go watch 2001: A Space Odyssey for the same kind of warning, or just Oppenheimer. This is a story we are constantly trying to tell each other. So outside of myth, and it's a weird distinction to even make, but religion has some things to say here too. In religious thought, playing God is the ultimate trespass. Who are you to judge God, to act like God, to think like God? His ways are always higher. His thoughts are always better. The very idea that any of us would dare to try to reign in such a way is utter blasphemy. And those blaspheme laws, those heretical laws are built into so many religions at such a foundational level that somewhere in there is, again, that attached myth, that attached warning of Frankenstein's monster that we aren't ready. And so we make it taboo through religion to try to control. Again, religion evolved right alongside with us for a lot of reasons and did a lot of things well for us. And this warning, I think, to some degree, though often done, I think, too harshly, is one of them. One of the most interesting things in the Genesis creation myth is that each time God gets done building, creating, making, so using his power, his technology, it also comes with a moral vision, and he notes that it was good, and he saw that it was good. It's not enough just to create. We need to create while we evaluate. Should we? Did it turn out okay? Are we too far outside of ourselves here? Do we know what we've done? Now, you could ask all those same questions to the creator in the Genesis creation because of how that creation turns out. Maybe the warning is that no one is ready for this kind of power, not even a god. That demotion is true everywhere in religion. In Islam, humans have a word that is specifically calling them stewards of creation, not owners of creation. We see warnings in Buddhism for the middle way, cautioning against extremes. Even in enlightenment, balance matters. We have no balance when we create before we're morally ready to. This is one of the biggest critiques of the modern scientist. Visionary, sure, yet vulnerable to hubris. And a lot of that has to come with how the sciences are part of the capitalist society. And again, this is not me saying capitalism is bad, but competition often crushes concern. We saw how quickly a lot of these AI ethic boards were disintegrated amongst the race to the top for this AI bubble. That's not good. That shows us our priorities are off. So, religious humility, though often abused, holds a certain truth. Power needs reverence, not worship, but reverence. And then there's the philosophical response. Hans Jonas has a wonderful quote: "Act so that the effects of your actions are compatible with the permanence of genuine human life on earth." What a wonderful little rule. That's from the imperative of responsibility. We can talk about Aristotle's golden mean. This comes from his Ethics. Every virtue is balanced. Courage can become recklessness when not constrained. Heidegger talks a lot about how technology affects the world. He says, we begin to see everything, even humans, as resources to be optimized. Isn't the idea behind all of this for human flourishing and well-being? If that's the case, why has there been so much destruction, death, harm, and fear from these innovations? Again, do we need to go back to the drawing board and create a whole new ethic for technology? Even tying it back to our most recent episode, we talked about the concept of Wu Wei, not forcing. Technology tempts us to force outcomes instead of aligning with nature. So this is not to be anti-technology. This is not to be anti-first world countries or civilization or progress, but maybe to redefine what we think of as progress. Maybe to encourage more wisdom with the power that we get from technology, the same warnings that have always been going on. And it might even be technology that saves us from the technology that we have right now. So no, I don't think labeling innovation as always bad is the way to go. And I'm also still very happy to be part of the world that I am in. Sure, I think we've gone too far in a lot of ways, but man, am I glad that we went as far as we did in others. I'm glad that I don't have to worry about one of my kids dying of smallpox. I'm glad that I live in a society with an average death age of 76 to 84 as opposed to 30. Not all innovation is bad, and that's very important to understand. So let's kind of end with the takeaway here, the practical application, how we should be thinking about this, which is what I just started with. And I think it's pretty simple. Knowledge demands ethics around innovation. That to think we can have progress without those ethics is foolish. It's really just a regression then, but with better tools. That's not good. That shouldn't be the end all be all. Innovation without imagination can create a crisis much faster than we can solve them. So I think there's 3 virtues that we can encourage here. Humility. Not every power needs to be used or even created in the first place. We don't know what we don't know. It's okay to have limitations. Second, accountability. Fine, we do think it's right to move forward. We have considered all the angles. We are prepared for what the trade-off could be. What are we doing to actually make sure of that? What are we doing to actually make sure that even when we believe that, those people are still being held accountable so that we don't err again? If it is an error in the first place. We need guardianship. Creation, again, demands it. And third, like that other quote, imagination is so important. Maybe that's a weird word for you to think about, but for me, it makes perfect sense. Wisdom begins when we can really picture the consequences before they arrive. And so much of human history just seems to be a lack of imagination, a lack of being able to predict what could come. A good question to even ask yourself, if you're having a hard time thinking about what you believe about all of this or what the right and wrong of it is. Would you trust yourself, your future self, with infinite power? Oof, that's a hard question. A lot of us would probably consider ourselves pretty moral, pretty okay. But man, if even us, the person ideally we would trust the most, you wouldn't quite, not with 100% certainty, with infinite power? What makes you think you can trust a government or a room full of strangers or a foreign country or some other religion? And if we can't yet all trust ourselves or each other, can we slow down a little? If technology mirrors the maker, what does that say about us as humans? What does it say our priorities are? By the way, some technology says wonderful things about our priorities. That we are trying to alleviate suffering, that we are putting people first, that we are trying to connect and build bridges instead of tear them down. But other technology says something very different. Can we look at the sources there? Can we find a way to do one more and the other less? What happens when creation outpaces empathy? This is all I've wanted you to think about for today. This is the fire I'm sharing with you, that fire is good in this way. It can be beneficial. Look at the technology, the science, the innovation that is allowing this dialogue to happen. And your comments back to me. Amazing, beautiful, helpful. Ideally, I hope I'm not promoting something of harm, but I'm trying to just promote humility, accountability, imagination, wisdom, knowledge, care, consideration. So practice awareness over impulse. Curate some curiosity for yourself and be an advocate for ethics and reason along with innovation and design. Who's to say we can't have it all? But there's some parts we definitely know we need to have, and maybe we shouldn't keep striving to have the other until we catch up. So to close out here, we have learned to control so much. Why can't we fix that last thing to control ourselves? Our innovations are miracles. Our capabilities do make us gods. To be human is obviously to harness such power. Can we also make sure that to be human is to learn to hold it gently? Thank you. Let me know what you thought of this episode. A little bit different than what we've covered so far, what you might be used to hearing from me, but it's the whole point of this channel. I want to go everywhere with it. If it ignites curiosity or illuminates the truth, I want to share it with you. Please like and subscribe, turn on notifications, share, comment, think about joining the Patreon, do all the things. This was Saturday's video. I'll see you Wednesday with another new one. And until then, keep sharing. I recently started a Patreon, and I'd encourage anyone to join if you would like to contribute to the mission of this channel. I wanted to give a special shout out to my first Blaze tier patron, James Geider. Thank you so much for the generous support. You'll see a few others on screen at the Flame tier, and then there's a few more who have already joined the Ember tier, which are listed in the description of this video. Please consider joining these fine people. Thanks, and have a great day.